A recent survey that was done a few years ago looked at racial preferences when it comes to dating. The first thing to keep in mind is that this survey is heavily comprised of white people. The white demographic accounts for 81.6% of this survey. Since this analysis is looking at how white men performed against Asian men, we're only going to be looking at the white and Asian demographic for this, and with that said, we can see that the Asian demographic accounts for only 8.8%. So the white demographic outnumbers the Asian demographic by roughly a factor of 9, or there's roughly 9 times more white people than Asian people, which will be important to keep in mind. When looking at the chart that shows the preferences that women have for dating another race, which is what they refer to as an increased liking, you can see that white men score a number of 385 proof positive preferences, and Asian men score a number of 180 proof positive preferences. When we normalize these numbers into relative terms to actually gauge dating power, we have to refer back to the demographics that the first chart showed. Since there's 43% women in total, we can assume that there's roughly 574 white females in this survey, and roughly 61 Asian females as well. When you take that into account, you can ratio these scores and see how these two groups really did. When looking at white people, there were approximately 574 white women in this survey, yet, white men only scored 385 proof positive preferences in their favor. When looking at Asian people, there were approximately 61 Asian women in this survey, yet, Asian men managed to score 180 proof positive preferences in their favor. White men failed to reach an amount of preference towards them that was equal to the amount of white women in the survey, while Asian men got a greater amount of preference towards them than the amount of Asian women in the survey. This is important to keep in mind. Remember that most women, regardless of race and across the world, still prefer their own over another race. Interracial dating is still universally niche and makes up a minority population against the aggregate of humans. With that in mind, for any naysayer that thought they could try to dismiss this by saying that all of the votes for Asian men are only coming from their own women, well, even if that false assumption was true, Asian men still got more votes for them than the amount of Asian women present in this, while on the other hand, white men couldn't even get enough votes to equal how many white women were present in this survey. That's brutal on two different accounts. To close this out, the main takeaway here is that Asian men got a higher rate of preference than white men when you factor in the representation against one another, and also, that Asian men scored more votes than the amount of Asian women even present in this survey, while white men failed to do that, and perhaps all of the votes for white men only came from white women, and white men actually performed horribly on the interracial front. TLDR, if incels were correct, white men should have performed much better and Asian men should have performed far worse, yet, neither happened. Ouch. That's brutal, and that's the black pill reality straight from facts, statistics, and math.